More than 1 billion people next year are going to need to buy a visa to visit Europe. So if you have any plans to go to Europe in the next year or so, or if any of your friends or family have plans, you're gonna wanna listen up to this whole video. Yes, you heard this right. The new requirement will affect billions of travelers, and it's gonna be essential to know all the details for your next trip to Europe so it goes smoothly. Now, if you or any friends and family are planning a trip to Europe, you'll want to share this video with them and make sure you stick around to the end to figure out how to take action so your next big trip doesn't have any issues. Now, by the end of this video, I'm going to show you exactly how much this new visa costs, the exact process to go ahead and apply for it, and a few other essential details about some anti-tourism things that are happening across Europe. Hey there everyone, my name's Mike Swigunski. I'm the best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and world-renowned entrepreneur who's been working and traveling in more than 100 different countries for the past decade. My mission is to share as much as I can about my experiences of working and traveling to every country around the world. And if this is your first time seeing me, make sure you hit that subscribe button for more travel tips and insights as I continue sharing everything I learned along my journey. Now, let's get back into it. What is this visa stuff about? I keep seeing headlines and headlines that you're going to need a visa to travel to Europe starting next year. And I want to share the good, the bad, and the ugly about this whole situation. So technically, this isn't a visa, it's more of an entry requirement, and there's a little bit of a difference between the two, and I'll go ahead and share exactly what this means. The new requirement for visiting Europe is called the ETIAS, which stands for the European Travel Information and Authorization System. This is essentially an entry requirement for visa-exempt nationals traveling to any of the 30 European countries. ETIAS is going to be linked to a traveler's passport and is valid for up to 3 years or until the passport expires, whichever one comes first. So if you get a new passport, you'll need to apply for a new ETIAS travel authorization. And with this valid entry requirement, you can enter the territory of the European Union or any of the 30 countries as often as you want for any short-term stays. This essentially means that to go into Europe for the 90 days within a 180-day period, you're going to need to apply for this entry requirement. However, it does not guarantee entry. When you arrive, the border guard will still ask to see your passport and any other documents to verify that you meet the required conditions for each individual country. Now, you might be wondering which countries in Europe are actually going to be impacted by this new travel requirement. And there's going to be about 30, but let me go ahead and share some of the most popular ones. So some popular destinations like Spain, France, Italy, Germany, and many more. Well, I'll leave a full list in the description below so you can see which countries are actually impacted. But let's go ahead and take a closer look at this larger sentiment. You might be wondering, why is this happening and what is the reason or rationale behind this? And a lot of people don't understand the way visas or sort of entry requirements work. And it basically comes down to a reciprocal visa or reciprocal entry requirement. Meaning if one country requires it, which for Europeans to visit the US, they need to apply for an ESTA, which is a very similar sort of structure. You go online, you do the application, and then you have this ESTA visa before you go and actually visit the US. Now, the cost of this is going to be around the same. It's going to cost about €7 for Americans to go to Europe, and you need to go ahead and apply for this visa or this entry requirement online before you actually travel. This is a reciprocal visa or entry requirement, meaning the US is already doing this for all Europeans, and now the Europeans are going to make an requirement for most Americans and a lot of other countries that are going to come into the European Union or anywhere in the Schengen zone. But you might be wondering, why now? What is going on in Europe, and what is the reason behind this happening in the next year? Now, there's a huge sentiment that I've been seeing pop up, and again, I haven't seen this in person. I've been traveling all around Europe, and I was just in Italy, the Czech Republic, and a large variety of other countries. I have not seen one instance of somewhere feeling unwelcoming to tourists or anything remotely close to that. So I want to say that, again, a lot of this is hyped up in the news from what my experience is like, but I do see a trend of anti-tourism happening. A lot of it's happening on social media and the news, but let's dig into what is actually going on. Did you know that this year, all tourists need a ticket to enter Venice, Italy? And this is going to become more frequent, I think, among popular tourist destinations in Europe. So now to visit Venice, you need to buy a ticket. And to get into Europe, you're going to need to also apply for a ticket. So your travels are going to get a little bit more complicated, and I'm seeing this as a common trend. Another common trend in Spain. Last week in Spain, there was a viral news story where tourists were being shot with water guns all over Barcelona and other parts of Spain in an anti-tourism protest. So the main reason is that a lot of locals are upset because there is an overwhelming number of tourists and visitors coming into their location and where they live. Now again, the protests are a clear message from the local community expressing their frustrations over the environmental and social impacts of mass tourism. Essentially, things are getting louder, they're getting more expensive, they're getting more complicated, and overall, it's just not a great thing for most locals. And again, most of these locals likely don't work in the tourism industry, so they're not seeing a lot of the upside. They're only getting the downside of mass tourism. So I was actually just in Venice and I saw the ticketing system up in place, but it was a trial run, meaning they hadn't initiated the process to start working. I did see some of the infrastructure, I saw a lot of the signs, but essentially as soon as you get off of the train station or anywhere to enter Venice, you're gonna need to show people a ticket before you can go inside. Again, they have a pretty easy system here because it's a bunch of canals and bridges, so to actually get inside to Venice, there's a pretty clear path that you have to follow to actually get inside. So if you don't have this ticket, you're basically not going to be allowed to go past and to enter Venice. So as you can see, there's a trend to kind of reduce tourism, and the thing that I'm wondering is, I don't think anybody's gonna stop going to Venice or to stop going to Barcelona if there's a 5 or 10 euro ticket. I just don't think it's gonna have the impact that most governments think. So the big issue I see here is that one, the locals should be coming up with solutions to find a win-win. This isn't necessarily the tourist or tourism fault, it's the faults of the government regulation who's allowing this to happen. So to figure out actual solutions, one of the solutions that I think is probably the no-brainer solution is if there's 10 trains to Venice every day and they can bring X amount of tourists, wouldn't you just limit the number of trains that go there every day? Instead of having 10, you have 5. So it's just not as accessible to a larger number of tourists. Limiting the number of trains or transport into the city seems like the easy no-brainer solution, but I know it's not as simple as that because a lot of train companies are privately owned and they're not impacted by the governments. But this seems to be a better solution than just charging people a 5 or 7 euro ticket to enter the country. So you might be wondering, how is this ETIAS system going to work when you actually need to go and visit Europe? It's going to be a simple 3-step solution. So first, you're going to have the application. You'll be able to apply online for your ETIAS travel permit. This involves filling out an application with your personal details, travel plans, and some security questions. This application process is pretty straightforward and it's going to take about 10 minutes. After that, you'll have the payment option. Step 2 will be, once your application is submitted, you'll be able to pay a fee. As for now, the cost is expected to be about 7 euros for adults, and then travelers under 18 and over 70 are going to be exempt from this fee. Step number 3 is after the payment, the application will be processed, and this should take about 96 hours to figure out if it's approved or not. But what they're hoping is that most applications will have full authorization in just a few minutes. So guys, why does this actually matter? There's a huge shift happening and travel is going to get a little bit more complicated. Again, I don't think this is going to be anything crazy, but there's going to be millions and potentially billions of people impacted by this. So even if 1 or 2% of those population doesn't know about this, it's going to cause some mishaps in people's travel, meaning they might get rejected to board your flight if you don't have this visa, or you might just have to pay some really big hefty fines if you don't have it when you land in Europe. Now, a lot of this is going to come down to each country by country in Europe on how they actually enforce it. So we'll have to wait around and see what actually happens, because the regulations is one thing, but how it's enforced is a completely separate sort of conversation. Remember, if you're planning to visit Europe in 2025 or beyond, it's crucial to be aware of these new requirements. Make sure you apply for this application well before your trip. It's just another thing to add on before your pre-planned trips, but don't want to save it for the last minute. So thanks guys. If you or any friends or family are going to Europe, make sure you send them this video so they know exactly how to get started. I'm going to leave some links below in the description so you can go ahead and directly apply for this visa if you're going to be traveling to Europe. And again, if you learned something new here, make sure you subscribe. I'm putting out new videos every single week. And I'm gonna leave another video for you right here that was hand selected just for you.